Hey guys, so today I wanted to talk again about PSA. Now, there's been a lot of, discourse regarding what PSA has chosen to do recently, and today we're here to talk about it. So what happened with PSA is that they have recently, in just, 3 days ago, they have increased the price of grading once again, but most importantly, most shockingly, and most devastatingly to me, they have removed the TCG Bulk service. And essentially, they've done this by combining TCG Bulk with Value Bulk. And this, I think, is both problematic and good. There's two sides to the story. So let's go over it today. So to start off, first and foremost, pretty much every PSA service has gone up. Most of them have gone up from a few dollars to up to $5 per service, and $5 is generally the range of how much these services have went up. And the biggest what reason that PSA has cited for this, okay, not only has they raised the price, but also turnaround times have also seen an increase. And PSA has cited a huge influx in submissions to the reason that the price is being increased, right? Basic supply and demand. And you could say this is reasonable supply and demand, inflation. It makes sense for them to raise pricing. However, when you look at it this way, when they have removed TCG bulk because they combine it with bulk value. So the original price in US dollars for TCG bulk was $18.99, and value bulk was $21.99, and now they are raising value bulk to $24.99, and they're combined. Now TCG bulk is combined with value bulk. This means that in effect, TCG bulk has basically gone up from $18.99 to $24.99, and this is a whopping it's a $6 increase in the price of grading. And this may not seem a lot to those who don't grade often or haven't or grade have not graded at all, but $6 per card is actually quite insane, especially for bulk. And to put it numerically, it's a 32% increase in price. When you think about it, when inflation, isn't even high right now. It's a 2, 3, couple percent. It's a couple percent. It's not anything great like 8 to 9% like we have seen at certain poor economic times. Right now, inflation is relatively controlled, but they are raising their services by 32%. And you certainly cannot call this, covering costs, whatever. They simply it just seems like greed. And I grade pretty much exclusively with PSA because of the brand recognition. And say what you want about that, but still I feel that this is pretty representative of corporate greed. And before I get into the rest of the potential pros or cons with this, I did also want to bring up the fact that PSA apparently recently acquired Beckett as well. And I just learned about this today when doing a little bit more research into this, because I want to make this video about the price increase. And apparently they acquired Beckett around December 2025, and this is quite concerning if you ask me, because it is anti-competitive and basically mimicking a monopoly, because although Beckett is continuing to operate as a separate entity as well as SGC that they own as well, it's basically like the grading, the trading card game, whatever sports card game, the overall grading, collectibles grading market was already an oligopoly. There was already very few firms dominating this market, namely PSA, Beckett, and CGC, who held most of the market share. And with that, still PSA and Beckett hold the majority of the market share. And then I believe it goes PSA, Beckett, CGC, and then SGC. And why that's problematic now that PSA, first of all, people are already finding it problematic when PSA owned just SGC, but now they also own Beckett, and that is pretty bad if you ask me, because in effect, not only like, not, although it's still, you know, technically nothing has, you know, changed to the 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 ignorant observer, nothing has changed to the ignorant observer, but you know, the market actually has changed because they now basically have monopolistic control. They can raise prices for all the companies if they really wanted to because they have control over them. And so this means they could artificially increase the price of grading because they are price setters. Since not only there was already significant pricing power due to them being in an oligopoly market, and these PSA already has such strong brand recognition. They have a lot of you know, brand loyalty, and there's a premium attached to their name for grading, regardless of how actual, you know, good their grading is. That's debatable, but there is a premium attached to their name, and so they already had pricing power. They continuously increase prices, they remove specials and stuff like that. You know, they're always rejigging their service, yet they can do that and people keep grading with them because they have so much pricing power and market share. And we can see that people continue to grade with it because the main reason they're citing is that there's too much demand. And they also, you know, prove this by also increasing turnaround times. Now, although I don't think anything is going to really change because, you know, who's going to go regulate the collectible card game grading industry, it's still, you know, concerning to see that, you know, PSA is just owning more and more of the grading card market share, and it really seems that we might need to be rooting for, you know, newer companies like TAG with innovative technology, patented, to really, you know, bring some real competition to PSA. Now, regardless of your feelings or my feelings about TAG as a grading company and how they present their slabs and etc., the biggest problem now is that the slabs don't hold as much value as PSA slabs, and that's just because of the name that PSA has built for themselves over so many years. That only comes with time, and I no doubt that they can continue to grow if they continue to do good work and follow have a good business model and methodology with their AI grading. There's no worry for that. But in the meantime, we're still stuck with PSA and they're still raising prices. So aside from the monopoly rant with PSA, the other real issue I have with this is that now the problem is that instead of, you know, when citing the, like, you know, increased demand is the reason why they have to raise prices, instead of citing that, when citing this, instead of, increasing their facilities and expanding the operations, growing larger to meet that demand, they choose to raise prices and decrease, the flow of cards being graded. Now, I do recognize they recently expanded to Toronto, Canada, and they are expanding the grading centers, tapping into larger markets, and that also could be a double-edged sword. It could be also contributing to the increased demand because they're expanding. But I still think, like, for example, within the major place like US, if there's increased demand there, they can still create more facilities and build that infrastructure instead of going out and acquiring more companies. They're trying to acquire, they're trying to catch them all for the grading companies when they could be expanding their own company and actually facilitate the increased demand. But of course, that is from a consumer point of view. That is maximizing the social benefit for the consumers. And I would argue that it could also help PSA quite a great deal because, if the cards are if it's cheaper to grade, people may grade more cards. They might actually end up making more revenue than, you know, increasing the price and making a lot of people not want to grade cards, or, you know, switch to a substitute, an alternate company. But, you know, that's their executives probably have done the analysis, you know, both weighing the fact that, you know, the consumer benefit, and also that, you know, how much profit they would make more if they kept the prices the same and expanded, you know, or they just raised the price, right? They probably considered that. But anyways, the biggest thing to counter that argument is that I think there's a chance, you know, a pretty good chance that another reason why they do raise prices instead of, you know, expanding their operations. Because, for example, if they did expand into even more facilities, like within a small area, they could reach, you know, greater economies of scale and, you know, lower their costs of operations potentially. It's a potential. If they looked into it, they probably could, and could increase their margin and still, you know, be able to maintain that same pricing instead of raising it. However, with, you know, us seeing that they have combined the value bulk and TCG bulk, that is both a move agreed that I see, but also that there is intentions to control output. They want to restrict the output of slabs, and this can be seen as a good or bad thing. This is because if they restrict output, there could be a lot less junk slabs, likely, because, you know, who's gonna pay, you know, $25-30 for, you know, to grade a reverse holo card, right? It just doesn't make sense anymore. Even, you know, V's, you know, even a lot of full arts, it doesn't even make sense to grade, right? A lot of people think twice before grading, you know, junk slabs. That's one potential benefit. Second is that, you know, it could, you know, as people are disincentivized to grade, it could control population sizes for certain cards, you know, as, you know, people choose not to grade them, you know, because of the higher cost of grading. It may lower the populations for a lot of cards, make them more valuable, and that might be something that PSA looks to do. Because it has been theorized in the past that PSA, you know, wants to control population control, stuff like that. Now, regardless of what their actual intentions are with controlling the population, raising the prices, I do think that is, you know, pretty much the only benefit that you can see from this, and that's like kind of hope, because, you know, now if you're a consumer, you're paying more to grade your cards. But it is technically a benefit that there's gonna be less junk slabs. However, at the end of the day, it still really boils down to PSA wants to make more money. It's pretty evident with that as they continue to raise prices, remove bulk services, and also acquire more grading companies. There is definitely an aspect of wanting to, you know, catch up with demand and, you know, meet the output, you know, and you know, make sure that there isn't too much cards coming in. But, you know, that could be easily combated, you know, with new facilities and expanding the operations, rather than trying to restrict the number of cards being graded. However, at the end of the day, yeah, that's their decision. It's quite disappointing, especially that they made a 32% increase in price by removing the TCG bulk service. And also, it is pretty noticeable that they basically never run specials anymore. You could argue that they just have too much demand. It doesn't make sense for them. They can't even facilitate that. But yeah, it still sucks as a consumer at the end of the day, right? Prices going up. You may have to people are getting priced out. They may have to start looking for cheaper substitutes. But yeah, I've seen a lot of discourse where people said, you know, I've been a fan for PSA for over 10 years, but now I'm starting to consider, you know, switching, because it's really just getting outrageous for the price of the grading card. Especially when just a few years back, you could grade a card for as low as like $7 on a special. But yeah, that's pretty much for this video. A bit of a rant all over the place about PSA monopolizing the market, you know, raising their prices, getting rid of services. But this is pretty, you know, a pretty big deal to me. I always hate to see a lot of changes to PSA. There's very few changes that PSA makes that I actually agree with and are happy with. But let me know what you guys think, if this is really a good thing. Because, you know, technically, if you're grading higher end stuff, it doesn't really affect you at all. But let me know what you guys think. And yeah, that's gonna be it for this video. Please let me know in the comments what you think about PSA making these changes, and yeah, subscribe to join the journey.